Elara's days in the quaint village of Eldoria were filled with unspoken challenges. The cobblestone paths were lined with worn-down homes, each whispering tales of hardship. Yet, amidst this backdrop, Elara shone like a beacon. At just 20, she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. With a basket of herbs in hand, she tended to the sick, her touch filled with compassion. Villagers marveled at her remedies, crafted from plants she gathered at dawn. But behind her gentle smile, few knew the depth of her struggles. Her mornings began before the sun kissed the horizon. She would prepare bread in her modest kitchen, the aroma filling the air as her younger brother stirred awake. As the village cockerel crowed, she'd wrap a scarf around her hair and head to the bustling market. The energy of the place was both exhausting and exhilarating. Elara's stall wasn't the grandest, but her warmth drew customers. Whether they bought bread or her famed herbal ointments, they left with more than goods. They left with hope. Despite her limited means, Elara never let poverty dim her spirit. Her laughter echoed through the village, a melody that even the castle guards paused to listen to. Children often followed her, clutching wildflowers or seeking tales of knights and dragons. In those moments, she became more than just a healer. She was the heart of Eldoria. Her kindness was a reminder that even in medieval history, resilience and empathy could thrive. Her connection to nature was unmatched. Villagers often whispered about how she seemed to speak to the earth. Elara believed every plant had a purpose, every flower held a story. Under the shade of the great oak near her home, she would sort through her findings. Lavender for calming restless minds, chamomile for soothing aches, and mint for weary travelers. Her hands worked with precision, her heart driven by a purpose greater than survival. Evenings were a blend of exhaustion and reflection. As the sun dipped behind the castle's towers, Elara would light a small candle by the window. She'd gaze at the stars, her thoughts wandering beyond the village. Did the nobles in the castle know the struggles below their grand walls? Were their lives truly as carefree as the villagers imagined? She often wondered if compassion existed in places where wealth overflowed. Her relationship with her younger brother was her anchor. Though barely 10, he had a curiosity that rivaled scholars. Together, they'd share stories by the fire, their laughter filling the night. Elara always encouraged his dreams, telling him he could rise above their circumstances. It was this bond that fueled her tireless efforts. She wanted a better future, not just for him, but for the entire village. And yet, beneath her tireless exterior, there was a quiet yearning. Elara's life was one of giving, yet she longed to be seen, not for her struggles, but for her strength. Unbeknownst to her, fate was weaving a tale far greater than she could imagine. A tale that would begin with a small act of kindness and grow into a story that would echo through generations. It was a chilly evening when Elara first saw him. The boy with hollow cheeks and eyes that mirrored a lifetime of sorrow. He sat hunched by the village wall, his frame trembling as the wind tugged at his tattered clothes. Elara paused, her basket of bread and herbs heavy in her hands. She didn't have much to give, but something deep within her, a flicker of compassion, compelled her to approach. "Are you hungry?" she asked gently, her voice a balm against the cold. The boy, barely old enough to fend for himself, looked up hesitantly. His lips quivered as he nodded, too weak to speak. Elara didn't think twice. She knelt beside him, wrapping her woolen shawl around his frail shoulders. "Come," she whispered, guiding him back to her modest cottage. The walk was silent, but the boy's eyes spoke volumes. Relief, gratitude, and the faintest glimmer of hope. Inside, the warmth of the hearth enveloped them. Elara's younger brother watched curiously as she prepared a bowl of soup, her hands moving with practiced care. The aroma of thyme and rosemary filled the room, mingling with the crackle of the fire. As the boy ate, Elara offered him bread. Simple, yet made with the same care she poured into everything. For the first time in days, the boy's trembling ceased. Elara learned his name, Finn, and with it, pieces of his tragic story. Orphaned by a plague that swept through a neighboring village, he had wandered aimlessly until he collapsed near Eldoria. Her heart ached as she listened, her empathy bridging the gap between their lives. She couldn't change his past, but she could offer him a chance to heal. That night, she tucked him into her brother's spare cot, vowing to keep him safe. Word of Elara's kindness spread quickly. Villagers spoke in hushed tones about the girl who had taken in a stranger despite her own hardships. Some praised her generosity. Others questioned her judgment, wondering how she could afford such compassion. But Elara paid no mind to the whispers. For her, the act of giving was not about recognition. It was about doing what was right. Over the following days, Finn became part of their routine. He followed Elara to the market, helping her carry goods and gather herbs. His presence brought an unexpected joy to their home, his laughter breaking through the walls of grief that had once surrounded him. Elara noticed how her brother, too, seemed happier. The small acts of kindness she offered had a ripple effect, touching more lives than she realized. Yet, Elara couldn't ignore the growing weight of responsibility. Her resources were stretched thin, and the harsh winter loomed ahead. She began to wonder how long she could sustain her acts of generosity. Still, she pushed forward, driven by a belief that even the smallest gestures could make a difference. Unbeknownst to her, someone else had been watching, and her quiet heroism was about to draw the attention of someone far beyond the village walls. The castle's high walls offered a vantage point few could access. Sir Alden stood in the shadows, his armor concealed beneath a simple cloak to blend in with the villagers. His role as the king's trusted knight often brought him into the heart of Eldoria, but this visit was different. From his perch, he observed the girl who had drawn whispers across the village. There she was, cradling the fragile boy in her arms, her every movement a testament to compassion. Alden had been raised in privilege, far removed from the struggles of the common folk. Yet, something about Elara's quiet resilience struck a chord deep within him. He had spent years studying medieval history, learning tales of nobility and heroism, but here was a living embodiment of the virtues he admired. She didn't wear a crown or wield a sword, but her kindness held a power that rivaled any ruler's decree. For weeks, Alden returned to the village in secret, always keeping a safe distance. He watched as Elara navigated her days with an unyielding spirit. Whether she was bargaining with merchants or tending to the sick, she carried herself with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. The way she shared her meager resources without hesitation, it was as though empathy coursed through her veins, a force as natural to her as breathing. The more Alden observed, the more he found himself questioning the world he knew. The grand feasts and golden halls of the castle paled in comparison to the humble scene before him. A young woman mending the fabric of her community with acts of love. It wasn't just the boy she had saved. It was the spirit of the village itself. Her actions inspired hope in a place that had known so much despair. But Alden wasn't merely a silent observer. He began taking notes, recording every moment that revealed Elara's character. In his journals, he detailed her courage, her selflessness, and her ability to uplift others despite her own hardships. These were not the traits of a mere peasant, he thought. They were the makings of a leader, someone who could inspire even the most jaded hearts. He couldn't help but wonder how someone like her could remain unseen in a world that so often rewarded power over kindness. One evening, as Alden prepared to leave the village, he overheard a conversation between two merchants. They spoke of the harsh winter ahead and the dire conditions the poor would face. Alden's chest tightened. He thought of Elara, her unwavering generosity, and the strain it must place on her. It was in that moment he made a decision, one that would change both of their lives forever. Still cloaked in anonymity, Alden began plotting his next move. He knew that revealing himself too soon could jeopardize everything. For now, he would remain in the shadows, watching and waiting. But his admiration for Elara grew with each passing day, and he felt a pull stronger than duty. Her story was no longer hers alone. It was becoming his as well. And soon, their paths would intertwine in ways neither could have predicted. The marketplace buzzed with its usual chaos, vendors shouting over one another, children darting through the crowd, and the occasional clamor of a dropped barrel. Elara stood at her modest stall, her fingers deftly arranging loaves of bread and small jars of herbal remedies. It was another day of scraping by, her thoughts drifting to how she would make ends meet as winter drew closer. And then, from the corner of her eye, she noticed a cloaked figure approaching. The stranger moved with an air of quiet purpose, their face obscured by the hood's shadow. Elara's heart quickened, but she stood her ground, offering the same warm smile she gave every customer. "How may I help you?" she asked, her voice steady despite her curiosity. The figure placed a single coin on the counter, pointing to a loaf of bread. It was a simple exchange, until Elara noticed the pouch they left behind, heavy with an unmistakable clink of gold. She stared at the pouch, her mind racing. Surely, this was a mistake. Gold of this magnitude didn't simply fall into the hands of peasants. She called out after the stranger, her voice barely cutting through the market's din, but they vanished into the crowd like a shadow retreating from the light. Her hands trembled as she opened the pouch, revealing a fortune beyond her wildest dreams. It was more wealth than she had seen in her entire life. Confusion mingled with awe as Elara tried to make sense of the gift. She scanned the market, hoping for a clue, but found none. Her thoughts spiraled. Was this a test? A trick? Or was it, perhaps, an act of pure kindness? The weight of the gold felt almost too much to bear, not because of its physical heft, but because of the responsibility it carried. This wasn't just a lifeline. It was a chance to rewrite her story. That evening, as she sat by the fire with her brother and Finn, Elara laid the pouch on the table. Her brother's eyes widened in disbelief, and even Finn, who rarely spoke of miracles, seemed stunned. "What will you do with it?" her brother asked, his voice filled with wonder. Elara didn't have an answer yet. The possibilities were endless, but so were the risks. She knew one thing for certain. This gift, mysterious as it was, had the power to change not only her life but the lives of those around her. Over the next few days, whispers spread through the village. Some speculated the gold was a reward for her kindness. Others suspected it was cursed. Elara kept the pouch hidden, her heart torn between gratitude and fear. She longed to use it to help her community, but doubt lingered. What if the gift came with strings attached? What if it drew envy or danger to her door? The questions weighed on her, but her resolve remained steady. Little did Elara know, the one who had given her this extraordinary gift was closer than she imagined. The stranger's intent wasn't just to provide her with riches, but to set in motion a series of events that would test her heart and courage. As Elara wrestled with her newfound wealth, the village around her began to change in subtle, curious ways. And somewhere in the shadows, a pair of watchful eyes waited to see what she would do next. The castle loomed over the village like a silent sentinel, its grand halls shrouded in mystery for most who lived below. Elara had never imagined she'd be summoned to such a place. When the royal messenger delivered the order, her hands shook as she clutched the parchment. Why would the king wish to see a mere peasant? The thought gnawed at her all the way to the castle gates, her heart pounding against her ribs. Stepping inside, Elara was overwhelmed by the sheer magnificence of it all. The marble floors gleamed like mirrors, and tapestries depicting centuries of medieval history adorned the towering walls. Servants moved gracefully, their steps silent as whispers. Yet, Elara felt out of place, her simple dress and worn boots a stark contrast to the splendor around her. She clutched her scarf tightly, her mind racing with fear and questions. Had she offended the crown somehow? Her nerves peaked as she was led into the great hall. The room was vast, illuminated by chandeliers dripping with crystals. At its center stood a man she recognized immediately, the cloaked stranger from the marketplace. He was no ordinary man, though. Clad in elegant armor and bearing an air of authority, he introduced himself as Sir Alden, the king's most trusted knight. Elara's breath caught in her throat as he began to speak. "I've watched you for some time now, Elara," Alden said, his voice calm yet commanding. He spoke of her kindness, her unwavering empathy, and the way she had cared for Finn and countless others. Elara's cheeks flushed with both pride and confusion. Why would someone of his stature take notice of her? Alden continued, revealing that the gold she had received was his doing, a gesture meant to honor her selflessness. The revelation left Elara speechless. She struggled to find words, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Gratitude, disbelief, and even a hint of suspicion warred within her. Sir Alden's expression softened as he reassured her of his intentions. He had come not to demand repayment, but to offer her an opportunity, a chance to use her compassion on a greater scale. The king, moved by Alden's accounts, had agreed to fund the creation of a tavern for travelers and the poor, with Elara at its helm. The weight of Alden's proposal was immense. Elara's first instinct was to decline. After all, what did she know about running such an establishment? But as he spoke of the lives she could change, her resolve began to shift. Alden's words were more than just a request. They were a challenge, a call to action that stirred something deep within her. This was more than a gift. It was a purpose. As she left the great hall that day, the grandeur of the castle no longer intimidated her. Elara's mind was filled with possibilities, her heart both anxious and hopeful. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Sir Alden had opened a door she hadn't even known existed, and behind it lay a path that could alter the course of her life and the kingdom itself. Somewhere, in the vast corridors of her thoughts, she began to dream of what could be. The tavern stood at the crossroads of Eldoria, its wooden sign swaying gently in the breeze. What began as an idea had blossomed into a beacon of hope, thanks to Elara's tireless dedication. Travelers from far and wide marveled at the warmth of the place, not just from the hearth, but from the people who gathered within. For many, it was more than a tavern. It was a sanctuary. The weary found rest, the hungry found food, and the lost found a sense of belonging, all under Elara's watchful care. Elara ran the tavern with the same compassion that had guided her since her days in the village. She welcomed all who entered, whether they were nobles in disguise or peasants with empty pockets. No one left without a meal, a kind word, or a renewed sense of hope. Word of her generosity spread like wildfire, reaching even the farthest corners of the kingdom. Her name became synonymous with kindness, an inspiration to those who heard her story. But running the tavern was no easy task. There were days when the demands felt overwhelming, supplies running low, conflicts arising among patrons, or the sheer exhaustion of managing so many needs. Yet, Elara never faltered. She leaned on the support of Finn, her younger brother, now a spirited teenager who had become her right hand, and on the wisdom of Sir Alden, who visited often to offer guidance. Together, they built something extraordinary, brick by brick and act by act. Over the years, the tavern became more than a place to rest. It evolved into a hub of community and resilience. Villagers came to share their burdens, to celebrate their joys, and to seek counsel. Elara started programs to teach herbal medicine, passing on the knowledge that had once been her livelihood. She also organized efforts to aid the poorest in the kingdom, ensuring that no one was forgotten. Her empathy was not just an emotion. It was a force that reshaped lives. The impact of Elara's work extended beyond the tavern's walls. Her reputation reached the royal court, inspiring new laws that prioritized the welfare of the kingdom's most vulnerable. Even the king himself visited the tavern, disguised as a commoner, to witness the miracles that kindness could achieve. What he saw moved him deeply, leading to further support for Elara's efforts. Her vision had not only changed her village, but had begun to transform the kingdom itself. As the years passed, Elara's name became a legend. Children grew up hearing stories of the woman who turned a small act of generosity into a legacy that spanned generations. They spoke of her as a hero, not for wielding a sword, but for wielding compassion in a world often devoid of it. Her story reminded people that even the humblest beginnings could lead to greatness. She became a figure of inspiration, a symbol of what humanity could achieve when guided by empathy. Yet, for all her achievements, Elara remained humble. She often reflected on the path that had brought her here, from the dusty streets of her village to the bustling halls of her tavern. She never forgot the boy she had saved, the knight who had believed in her, or the villagers who had supported her. Their stories were woven into hers, a tapestry of interconnected lives that proved one simple truth: small acts of compassion could indeed change the world.